A Shabbat Shalom Akim, Shabbat Shalom, giving all honor, praises, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teachers of truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwath who may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Araquai. I am here with another quick and Lord's will as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of just wanted to do a little bit of comment on this this post that I came across earlier today. It says here, Christians across the U.S. as adult content creator Lily Phillips, who went viral for sleeping with 100 men in 24 hours, gets baptized. So essentially, this woman here you see on the screen now, she's becoming baptized, right? Quote unquote. Being washed in, some water and stuff like that. And, I wanted to do, I guess, a lesson on this because it really shows you the filth, of this nation. And I find it very interesting too, because when you really think about how Babylon is described, because Babylon is described essentially as a whore. So it's no coincidence that this is the type of behavior that it perpetuates within the society, because this is the fruits thereof here. And the fruits thereof are women that do this, that live this sort of lifestyle, right? And the scriptures talk about how, as is the king, so are the people. As a matter of fact, let me start off there. And I didn't really have anything written down, but I sincerely pray that this lesson may be edifying. So let me start off here. And of course, my apocrypha is not working. Just bear with me, Akim. 1 second. So this is Sirach chapter 10, verse 1, and it says, "And a wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. As the judge of the people is himself, and so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all that dwell therein. An unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority the city shall be inhabited." So this is essentially what we're seeing, the fruits thereof is the results of an empire with bad fruits, with bad works, with bad deeds. When Yahushua spoke about a tree is known by its fruits, when you go into that word fruits, it refers to the Greek word karpos, which means deeds, works. And this is the type of fruits that you see on the screen here, where you see this over-sexualized culture that we live in, where this is the type of behavior that is very normalized, right? This is the type of behavior that is seen as something as empowerment, but essentially what it does is it's a flame that burns very hot, but at the end it leads to destruction. And this is the type of and of course this also includes our people as well, because the scriptures talk about how the righteous is more excellency of this neighbor, but the ways of wicked seduceth them, right? So they've been seduced, not just with well, I should say it like this: they've been seduced with philosophies and believing that this is actually empowerment, but this is actually killing you. This is destroying you, right? Because now it leaves a lot of our women, not having, you don't have essentially a covering. You don't have a husband. You don't have protection. You know what I'm saying? So essentially, you're just left out in the open just to be ravished, right? So, this is the fruits thereof of actually being in an over-sexualized society. And it's no surprise that, Babylon, it's no coincidence, I should say, that Babylon is described as a whore. And I'm going to get that in a second. But let me get this on a micro scale just to discuss this real quick. This is Sirach chapter 42, verse 11. And it says, "Keep a sure watch over a shameless daughter, lest she make thee a laughingstock in thine enemies, a byword in the city, and a reproach among the people, and make thee ashamed before the multitude. So this is essentially a shameful thing, a shameful type of behavior, not just on a micro scale within, her family, the way that she lives, right? Speaking about this person here, but this is also a very shameful thing, in a way that, the society is supposed to be governed. But this is a very shameless society where essentially the sweet has been made bitter and the bitter has been made sweet, right? Everything has essentially been turned upside down, right? So instead of being modest and dressing modestly and coveting after a woman coveting after her own husband, and actually wanting to be properly instructed by a righteous man, that is seen as oppression. And them taking their clothes off and busting it open, that is seen as empowerment. That's seen as get your bag. That's seen as you're breaking the shackles of oppression, right? And the schools have done a very fabulous job of pushing this sort of sentiment, right? So let me go to, because when you think about it, like within the ancient times, when you have certain customs put forth in place, when you have particular customs, this type of behavior is essentially shunned, right? Like if we were living in the ancient times and she just had her own husband, or say for example, when you go into like Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter, if she had just laid with that one man, he would just pay the father the 50 shekels of silver, right? And essentially it's a win-win-win, because she would now have her own husband, that man would have his wife, right? And the child that is conceived from that union, has both of their parents. They have both father and mother, right? So we, when you go into the ins and outs of these laws, the laws are really not grievous. They're actually strongly needed for a society that's very well adjusted, right? To keep essentially society properly governed, right? As a matter of fact, I think it says that in Timothy. Is it 1 Timothy? 1 second. Okay, this is 1 Timothy 1 verse 9, and it says, knowing this, that the law is not made for the righteous man, but for the lawless and the disobedient, and for the ungodly, and for sinners, for the unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, and for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, for men stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, right? So this is the purpose of the law, right? And it's a very wonderful thing that the Heavenly Father gave us these laws to be able to govern, to understand the way and the ins and outs of why the laws are strongly needed upon the planet Earth, right? And what also proves this also is that the I forgot my point. But anyways, let me get Revelation 17. This is Revelation 17. I'll start at verse 1, and it says, and it came one out of 7 angels which had 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, whom the kings of the earth committed have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunken with the wine of her fornication. So the different ways and the philosophies these other nations have taken on, and they realize this is not a proper way to actually have governing within our society. This is why there's a lot of hatred towards the whore, right? What proves this, actually, there's been different accounts of, I believe it's Iran, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a woman, and then she was walking the streets like almost half naked or something, right? And in the East, especially like in the so-called Middle East and those countries, they prefer to have their women covered. They prefer to have their women dressed, modestly. There's more of a respect for their husbands. There's more of a cohesion in terms of family oriented, cohesion, beliefs in the similar matters, right? So there isn't essentially a mishmash of different ideas and contrast of the ideas and so and this and that and the fourth, which creates a bunch of confusion, right? As you have here, where you have women that believe in this, and there are, then there are some that are essentially atheists, and it creates all about a bunch of confusion, because there's so much different types of philosophies coming out of this Babylon, right? Because she's known as the mother of all harlots. She encapsulates all those different vain gods and philosophies that have existed and practices that have come from ancient kingdoms, right? And this is another reason why a lot of these countries have a strong dislike for America, because they perpetuate this sort of filthy behavior, not just upon their men, but upon the welfare and understanding of their children and their women as well, right? They don't want those philosophies, within their country to, because they understand essentially the end result of what happens when you give these women too much liberty, because the scriptures talk about that, right? Don't take it from me. Let me see if I can find it. Where was that? I think that's Sirach 20. Is it 25? Sirach 25, verse 25, and it says, "Give the wanton no passage, neither a wicked woman liberty to gad abroad," right? So they're not supposed to have this immense amount of freedom, because what comes with that is that they essentially start to destroy themselves, right? So I just want to just quickly touch on this, right? And understand that this is not, because this is not a kingdom or a society that's actually leading towards family, right? The men are very polarized, from the women, and the women are are disgruntled with the men, and this and that and the fourth. There's actually no sense of coming together, in the sense of to bring forth and be fruitful and multiply, right? People are having children a lot less, because why would a man take on a woman like this to have children, right? That's what the scriptures talk about. It's better to die without children than to have them, except the fear of the Lord be with them, right? Because then you have a bunch of disgruntled, unruly GMO Tyrones that have so much, they're just messed up in the head because their mom, was essentially playing the harlot, right? So this, it shows you that this, as a matter of fact, let me get that in Isaiah 13. Verse 19, and it says, "And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah." So showing you the destruction of what happens, or what will happen upon America, because America is they follow within this same vibration of being a spiritually Sodom and Egypt, right? It's the same filthy, perverse lifestyle, right? And it's essentially it's a detestable sight in the eyes of the Lord, right? It's not a kingdom that is upright. It's not a kingdom that pushes forth righteousness, right? So the end result thereof is nuclear fire, right? Just like how the end result of a priest that plays the whore, her end result is fire, right? So it's very fitting. You see how, there's parallels of, what happens to the whores back in the ancient times, right? And what's the judgment for America? It's fire, right? So anyways, I just thought I would just comment on that real quick, but Lord's will, this lesson was quickly and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.